Hello and welcome back. I am Megan McKay, and you are here with me, Grizzly Talk, Tough Talk for Challenging Topics. This is my MCAT version, or Missoula Community Access Television version of my radio show, basically. So, same name, not very creative, but I interview very integrated individuals in our community who have excellent insight and support mental health in some form or fashion, and a lot of times have so much information to share that I find would be beneficial. And that today is Mr. Tony Swartz.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Anthony Swartz. I am a longtime Missoula resident, raised in Sealy Lake. I survived a traumatic brain injury when I was 15. Had to go through a range of life and through the ups and downs and trying to find what works. So trying to build what we can build off and have a safe community. I run a radio show from 11 to 1 on the same station you do, 101 KFGM. It's called Water Over the Dam. It's also based on helping people with mental health, and it fights fentanyl and human trafficking and helps find resources to do so. It really is something, as a parent, I feel we need to put more energy into, is helping these people understand what they're involving and what the music and genres that is trapping these kids and making them think inappropriate things are okay or that they're acceptable. I am a part of the first Parent Leadership Training Institute graduate. I created a program that would help people that are victims and bullies deal with the trauma, deal with PTSD, communication, help give work ethic, discipline, make them accountable for their actions. Because that's where I think, as a parent, I needed accountability, I needed structure, and so Socorro Warrior Arts gave me the family brace. They helped bring us in and understand what it was to be a survivor instead of a victim, constantly running from my issues. My kids can stand up for themselves and the people that are less fortunate. And when a person has ill harm or is got the body function, they know how to read it and identify it, where somebody without those trainings doesn't have the blessing of that. What would you like to talk about? Like, I'm a proud father. My kids saved my life from addiction, from self-harm. I didn't have coping mechanisms. I didn't have a family that supported me. I've got a long-term addiction issues. I've said that, all kinds of complications that have led from a traumatic brain injury. I was on 21 pills a day, and I couldn't manage myself, let alone the world. And so by the power of God, I got given my first son, James, and with his blue eyes, I knew what I was doing. I needed to change, and I found a whole other environment and structure in my community. And then his little brother, he's the most expensive and overwhelming roommate I've ever had. He totally is, because great kids, amazing characters. There's nothing absolutely, I can't identify anything other than they live with separation anxiety because their mom chose to live an outside life instead of being there coping with what they got going. And not that we have to be together to cope, but it's our responsibility to make sure that they had a better life. And that's what made me stand up. And I've been clean from heavy narcotics for almost 16 years. And
it's amazing.
it's been heavy trying to step out of that comfort zone and then finding a community that I can trust and embrace, because the 12-step programs have an idea, but I was never able to identify with the things that they would see as sobriety or needed because of my choice of medication. I wanted what they offered. I think it's heavy that as humans we have people around us that want us to do right and continue to challenge us to do more.
Yeah.
And that's what I think as a family man, my community has done for me. I work with the parenting place, and I've been with there since 2011. And I went from being a hostile dad, not knowing how to communicate, to being able to understand their needs, communicate with them when they're going through an irrational time, and see when they're hungry, and it's the same brace all the way through, even at a teenage level. It's the same. Are you hungry? Did you sleep? What's going on? And figuring out what their time with Snapchat has been the heavy one on my guys, finding problems all kinds of across the board. In the 4th grade, my son James, his best friend, hung herself because she was getting bullied. And so
Jeez.
It's heavy that we try to find better communication and allow our kids to constantly know they're loved, and that they're, whatever it is, we can work through it and we can talk. And sometimes it seems like they hold a lot to themselves, but it's something that we just got to push, is that they're loved. And so it's an impulsive way of life, because majority of their life has been around social media. Smartphones became affordable in 2010, and I thought I was doing a justice, like, yeah, look at all the sweet stuff I'm doing. And I posted and I shared my life, and realizing the privacy I gave up with it, and not setting the right idol and putting their whole spectrum of life out there so they continue to grow with these and because of this is what they saw with their childhood, and so they continue with it. And since COVID, the amount of predators that have grown through these programs isn't just pedophiles. There's all kinds of ones that are taking advantage for money, for just for ill will, and trying to lower somebody else to make themselves seem bigger. So it's heavy for me to give them work ethic and discipline and make them accountable for what they're doing. And so as long as they can say that they're of that, they're responsible for their actions. It's sometimes they're not going to get the answer that they want, or I'm not going to get the answer I want, but we can get what they need, and we can get an understanding of where we're missing.
There are adults that will go their entire lives without having that ability to hold themselves accountable. And that is a powerful thing to teach them, and to be able to do that yourself, and to model and teach that it's okay, and that you don't have to go down that elevator of shame when you do mess up, because we're human. We all do things that aren't great at times.
Yeah. Learning to breathe and knowing that most likely whatever happened, we're not the only ones that made those choices. That's been huge for the parenting place to help me realize and grow as a dad. It's the community out there. It wasn't so much of just renewing the program, but renewing the faces that were getting it too. Because now when I'm out in my community, with the parent leadership, when going across the country, like, there's so many levels of this, that we can continue to embrace and grow, but we limit ourselves, and that's where we need to step out of our comfort zones occasionally and see what we can really gather and value. My kids have given me the quality of honestly stepping through that, and with what their mom did was really a blessing because of the structure it put in my life, and it made me a stronger man. Having the time to be puked on, peed on, and the whole adolescent, it's the best now. Like the emotional range is so crazy as teenagers. I wish I could go back to just when it was simple, like just here, have a bottle or whatever. But I wouldn't change it for anything. But what I know now, I'm like, gosh, I wish I would have enjoyed it more instead of stressing on wanting them to grow up, and now that they're growing up, I'm like, gosh, it's only a matter of time before they're adults out on their own and have their own families. And just hoping that whatever I embraced, it's given them tools to go beyond where I was, and having the community definitely is much more than what I did. I was raised in Sealy, and my 8th grade teacher got shot. It was a crazy place to live. There was so much hostility, and I moved in with my brother because my mom was incapable of being actually there for me and there for anyone else, because she needs somebody else to take care of what herself is, and so it was something outside of her comfort zone, even doing what she did. I appreciate, but it's those things that we're like, I hate you for. Now as a parent, I'm like, I see why you did that. I see the things that or understand where she failed, because I got a large settlement when I got hurt, and she didn't have the tools of how to utilize that stuff appropriately. So she did it the way she did, and it got used up instead of continuing to grow. And that was a part of my mental health that haunted me for years on what my life would have been like if my dad had been alive, or had she utilized that money right, because of what the lack of I'm able to do. And it's not that I'm unable. If I was still on the pills, I don't think I'd be capable of making responsible choices, that I would be able to work at Logjam and give the commitment to the crowds and the safety nets, watching out for everybody to make sure that they're having a safe time. It's something that I think a large time we just fall under the trust of a doctor. Like, this guy went to school for all this, so he's got to know more than I do, instead of like sometimes trusting your instinct and having the better ability. I was the first person on felony probation to be able to utilize medical cannabis, and it pulled me out of trouble. It gave me a healthier community. It gave me people to stand and ways of coping through my problems, and having a thing and a substance that didn't over impair my judgment or character, where I could be a father, I could be a role model, I could live a somewhat normal life that was incapable prior. That's all I ever wanted when I was 15, is to be a normal kid and have a conversation like we're having today.
Yeah.
Because I would just fall asleep and I'd have a seizure. But everywhere I go, I tell people to go. I've been telling Nick Chakota to hire Tor Harrison to do our security, so our people can understand what it is to take care of themselves if somebody is coming at them, from kickboxing to judo, jiu-jitsu. And it's important for people to have these skills, especially security guards. But yeah.
Well, and there's so much there, and it is so interconnected. Going from just the martial arts alone, I could talk forever on that subject, and thank you for your vulnerability on, air, basically.
I'm a rambler too, I apologize with how topics can go all over, but I think with the topic of mental health, it is all over.
Yeah.
It's mostly about finding coping and a community that will help embrace.
And that's why I'm actually there's so many important points in there that you did mention. The effect of addiction on families and self, and breaking the intergenerational cycle with trauma, and the reality of the struggles and the challenges of somebody who does go through that. I'm in recovery myself. I've been through the challenges. I've come and broken many intergenerational bonds of trauma, and that's why I do this and talk about this stuff openly, and the impacts of it, and make it okay just to be human at the end of the day, and to say we can struggle, but we can also survive and do better at any point.
Right. I didn't know that before my kids. I didn't know better. I didn't know that there was other communities outside of my addiction until my kids. I had the same therapist, Phil Hamilton, for 20 plus years, and he believed in me. He stood by me up until he retired, and now it's Mike Nile, and every week I'm given relief of pulling my knee off my neck and giving me room to breathe, and that there's so much more growth. But I've grown so much from the person that met them and that didn't have the structure. Or I have ways of dealing with things instead of being impulsive, instead of instantly taking things personal too.
Yeah.
That's a huge factor of going over to legislature or going to DC and talking about child care programs, because kids are so treated secondary. It's disgusting, and that's the society that we need to really embrace and protect, and teach them how to be themselves, authentic selves all the way through, and help them find to break our patterns of trauma and the things that ultimately harassed our generational problems, like we have said, is it's on them, but we got to give them tools to go outside of it. And I think constantly putting what's in the media and in music and movies is making that more and more.
Of course.
And I'd like to find more ways of getting out of those communities, shutting off the radio of our other than our local frequency. I'm very proud of that too. I've been doing it for 42 weeks. Water Over the Dam is something that it gave me a place where I was able to. Do you like Sublime? Bradley Knoll's sister Kelly came on my show, and we talked for an hour and a half on recovery and finding ways of dealing with trauma and dealing with like what we're saying here. That's another person I'd love. She's in Long Beach, but she'd be a great conversation for you, that you could go into deep detail on what she had to go through on just losing her brother. She went to alcohol, and equally it was just almost as bad as heroin. It dang near killed her a few times.
That was mine.
And
alcoholism.
His son was also a heroin addict, and he got clean. They started a recovery house in Long Beach. Right on May 10th, they had Sobriety Day. I'm not sure if that's also the day that Bradley passed, but that's a huge day for the Missoula community. At the Wilma, we had a gentleman that took care of all of our lighting and sound. His name was Joey Connell, and he was the brother of the guy that molded and taught us how to do our jobs right at Log Jam. Mikey has been a huge part of me stepping out and finding a community. He told me to do this because initially I wanted to be a part of the suicide prevention house called Joey's House. And there just wasn't a house up yet, and there wasn't space for that with what they had. There may be in a board member, but the direction of that right now is just isn't as in place as I am. And so parts of that impulsiveness got me out there looking for other ways to use those tools that he was talking about in my community. And I had breakfast with the mayor. I talked at a convention for parents.
Nice.
And every time I do something like that, I feel like overwhelmed and like that, like I actually accomplished something that is worthwhile, that can leave a lasting mark, instead of where my addiction and the self-harm really was. I think we could really see our community grow if we brought in Socorro Warrior Arts to schools and help kids through like PE or physical deal, like the direction of it.
Like teaching them actual self-defense.
I think so, yeah. And it's beyond, well, it's self-confidence too.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a huge step there, because Taekwondo gives a confidence that's outside of what their capabilities is. And over here, they even got to earn their white belt, and that's beautiful. Having like that discipline of something that's normally just given, like, hey, you actually got to step it up and give some structure to it. That's so needed with it, because everything is laid down. Or a cyber world.
Well, and we were talking, and that's actually how we ended up meeting, was at the Socorro, and in the self-defense, and that commonality of what we're just talking about now, and how it is so beneficial with the discipline, with the confidence that it teaches, with the ability to know that you can protect yourself, with the principles that, you know, such as the best fight, the fight that you win is a fight that you don't get into, and how to use those things to cultivate an actual peaceful life, and to do well and have a better sense of well-being. It's a way to be, and how that builds into other facets.
Yeah. Well, you build a confidence like that in a person that knows how to take care of themselves. They're less out to use a weapon. So more kids that have this ability will be more successful. It'll fight obesity. It will give structure and discipline that I'm lucky that I got, you know, and it's through my kids' time that has given me, like, this is what I'm really seeing. And I took some time in thinking about that. We spend a large portion of, there's a group of people that dress up like bikers, and they give kids a small piece of confidence that they're safe around the people that they're harmed. And so that costume often gives people the wrong idea of what safe is, or the area of what okay, or the idea of what they should be to be safe. And so what Socorro is given is that inner core of safe. And so somebody like Tor, Jim, Luke, Tristan, Josh, there's a variety of people in our community that could help kids with these life choices, or trauma that they got to manage, because it's not always easy to bring it out. Like we were saying earlier with Robin Williams, the class clown may be living with the darkest secrets, and so
It's kind of reality of things too, and it's the blanket of shame that keeps people silent, not wanting to talk about these taboo subjects.
I've constantly had to step up, being a disabled person, I always tried to raise myself to the same bar of what I saw normal as. I was not able to keep a job. I worked for the bid crew, and so I had the pleasure of being around a lot of veterans, knowing what they sacrificed. And a lot of them were 18 years old when they went in. And now they're living with things that I would never want to manage or put my kids through, or have my kids think that, you know, I support our military. I just don't support the government behind it because of the way that these humans have been treated and how they've been put out, the lack of structure of their overall needs. We need to start treating our veterans.
It's a giant healthcare systemic treatment of trauma in general, and as it comes to the VA, and I know that there's a lot of barriers in the way, but I absolutely agree that there needs to be better help for them. That's why I'm a huge advocate for veterans and first responders, because they don't get the support that they need.
Yeah.
And it is, at the end of the day, reflective of people who put their lives on the line for us. And it is a hopefully improving system. I mean, I was there in Phoenix when all of the stuff came out about the VA down there, and there were literally, and I was early on in counseling school when this happened, but veterans who reached out for help who wouldn't get any kind of assistance for half a year to years at a time and put on wait lists, blowing their brains out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And that still wasn't enough until a whistleblower came out. Then everybody was upset at the whistleblower for it. And there was a lot of severe repercussions for that individual, and it was just a giant mess. And I think since it has improved a bit, but there's just so much in general in the mental health care system, in the physical health care system, that do need to be improved upon. And there's no collaboration anymore. Everyone is separate in identities. Insurance coverage governs. It is business and profit driven at the end of the day, and it's a necessity, but there's such a struggle with balance.
It's the power that be that really makes it where it's at.
Yeah.
Montana, it's a beautiful state, and we got to take care of it and take care of the people in it and our next generation coming up. We got to know the full spectrum of how to take care of ourselves. Doctors need to put prescriptions of like the YMCA and places like that to young families, so they can get out and have a personal trainer that can give them a few minutes of whatever it is. And that was huge for me and my kids. It's just having that outside of our normal walls, and they had people they could play with, and commonly looking for just that general friend and
Connection.
Yeah, and that's huge for somebody that came from Sealy. There, a long time of the year, me and my mom would be out on the Boy Scout road, and there wouldn't be much connection or people around because there was less than 3,000 people in the entire. But it was the most beautiful time of life. The Bob Marshall, everything. How humble things were, getting out to get our own food, firewood, and for fun, hiking into the Bob Marshall, seeing the China Wall. And that's something I want to enjoy with my kids. And so I think the more time out of that and away from the screen is another thing that doctors got to kind of, even parents, some kind of models that we have to get in there, and affordability of getting to like Augusta to hike into places like that.
There's so many cases where that is, and there's been studies that have shown that exercise, for one, is more effective than SSRIs for anxiety and depression. But also for when you change your physical health, not for looks, but for your well-being and functioning to feel better, to decrease that depression and exercise, or depression and anxiety through exercise. It changes the way you think. It builds your confidence. It enhances your well-being and state of mind. But also, someone close to me, I mean, there's so many stories, said that was like the first thing that they had a really competent healthcare provider that said, go to the gym.
Yeah.
And especially, as a man, and you don't necessarily always want to sit down and talk about feelings and everything, that's one of the key ways to start tapping into that stuff, and then you can bring on emotional intelligence on board later. But you have to build that identity and confidence and better sense of being.
Yeah, the confidence in self of being.
Yeah.
Because that was totally lacking in mine, because it was inappropriate to put in appropriately to show feelings and emotions, because you were something soft, weak, and you were incapable of being what. And I think masculinity is important.
Absolutely.
But there's areas of where, in moderation, it's appropriate. And so,
having masculinity is not like having toxic machismo. You know, that is a whole broad extreme. But having a healthy sense of self and who you are with masculinity and femininity in that sense is a good thing.
I do agree. And knowing that as a male, some femininity or whatever, as I can pronounce it right, is okay to understand. I was raised around a single mom, and so my communication and being able to understand how the ladies I've lived with or been with, we can get to different areas where my friends had closed off patterns of life. It's really how we embrace and teach our kids how to let go of the things that haunted us, and communicate and talk to them about the things that did, and help them know not only was it them that got us through it, but how it was them that gave us courage to see through our normal patterns. We went through, and we're in a better place than we're then. We're a little bit further out. It's harder not driving. But during COVID, it was the best, because we could embrace each other and like hang out, and I could understand who they were as humans.
Yeah.
Where the school, it takes so much of them, and the things that it's introduced to them, I'm not sure I always am on board with, or I really understand the direction of it. And so
I have opinions.
Yeah.
And I try to stay pretty even when it comes to good benefit of both sides to anything on any of these shows. But yeah, it's always that whole school system topic is definitely, it's difficult. I mean, our systems aren't set up to support our kids necessarily.
No.
Montana is the best system I have experienced when it comes to education. Oregon was really good too. But still, it doesn't help every kid.
No.
And I think technical schools, I'm glad that those are becoming more popular too.
And trade schools for long-term uses of what, like, be an electrician, instead of spending so much money chasing something that's going to leave you in debt, instead of give you a structure of, it's impressive how something like that can really turn our community around and give us something to leave forward on. That's something I've been big with my kids. Instead of going to the university, try to find something that can pull them through. And if it's something that they still need or want to go with after they have their degree in whatever their trade is.
Right.
They can further pursue it because they'll be somewhat financially stable, instead of just throwing themselves to the wolf that
Well,
you know, the credit loans is like insane how the want of doctors and stuff out there.
it's gross. Like when I went through school, especially is when it started rising with the monetization of our educational system, and it went up by like 150 to 200%. It doubled within my time span within school in itself, and that's the biggest barrier to why we don't have enough professionals available, is because of the $200,000, $300,000 educational system loans that these kids are facing just to get out of any medical system. And that's the cost of a house. I have a lot of opinions about that myself too, but it's like, are you going to do better with an electrical apprenticeship or with a degree in philosophy and liberal arts,
Right.
And sure, there's things that you could do with the college stuff, but it takes so much more, and it is just, it's become a predatory field for lenders at this point.
The music program at the University of Montana doesn't, from what I was told, give the real tools to make a promoter successful, or give them outside of real tools to put into a place like Logjam and grow with it. It really is the bare minimum of it. And so
Yeah, but
that really made me realize like where we are and what we're throwing ourselves in, because these titles seem extremely important, but if we can go to something and learn life skills that outland architects and people like that, just a carpenter. The whole start of the whole factory is just, it's beautiful how there's that possibility, instead of where I could say where we were, our generation is capped at. Like, I guess there's always been trade schools, but really we haven't used them to their full potential, and maybe that's something this gap in generation will, and more trades will open with how states are changing. And I'd like to see also with that, like, of what the full process. I would like to be a peer support and help people with addictive stuff, but there's certain stuff that I've got the ability of talking, understanding what it's like firsthand, but helping them out secondhand, that's a whole other area of where we can improve, I think, just within the amount of time that I started with Turning Point, and how their whole change it's been impressive how they, drug testing, everything from where I was has completely changed. And I think we can see further more out of what to expect and what more to give kids because of what but what more somebody firsthand, and that's what's important. And
well, like in talking about addiction and what we were talking about earlier with there needs to be a balance in terms of accountability and given structure, also responsibility, being able to have somehow to get back onto track with life, but also being treated as a human and having it understood as it is an addictive, addiction is a disease-like process. It does change your brain. Everybody is susceptible to it. A lot of people have addictions or compulsive type behaviors that they're not even aware of are problematic, like workaholism or eating or
exercise.
Yep. Exercising is a huge addiction.
More people actually die from that, and what they're willing to put into their bodies than the drugs that we demonize. Because of diets, because of the different shakes or whatever they're willing to, antibiotic steroids, that's also going to be pushed into a Schedule 3 on the 9th.
Yeah.
But
Are you saying like doctor monitored?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely think it's important if you're going to do something that's growth, any kind of hormonal growth.
Yeah.
It needs to be monitored under a professional, and we got to be cautious of what the side effects, and I think there's age limits that we need to be cautious of.
Yeah.
Your brain stops growing at 25, and that's when your front lobes really are in a process, so you're aware, you know yourself more than I think a person like a young teenager that wants to have that chiseled body that's willing to do anything but doesn't actually know what he's doing. And so there has to be people that are giving him the healthier response on how to use what they've got naturally until their body is depleted. I think that's really an area that we need to give kids the education, that they've got everything to take it. It's just sometimes their weight, or they're just not mature enough to have that muscle compound yet. Or the metabolism continues to burn of, that's been...
Well, not weighing into societal pressures about looks or...
Oh man, that's awful.
Yeah.
Like we were saying, Snapchat. You look goofy, or your phone is old, or Lord knows what they're using now as reasons to bully people, but it typically is off of looks or what your parents can't afford, and them not having anything that identifies their self-worth.
Yeah.
That's where we have to embrace that. And I take away my kids' phones at 8 o'clock, and they go to bed at 9, so it gives them an hour away from the up-close blue screen.
Yeah.
They still play Fortnite and they watch TV, whatever, but it's at least not right into their, where my oldest, he'll only sleep a couple hours on it, and I realize if I leave it like out on the counter, he's sneaking out there to look at it. It's almost like dealing with a drug addict on its own.
Yeah, no,
you take it from them and they're like throwing the fist, like, why would you do that? You're
Withdrawal,
like,
you do. They go through withdrawals. And actually, the first time I had realized that had happened, it was like, holy crap, just like you're talking about, was at an inpatient residential facility where you can't have anything there and just see the freakouts by all the people. How am I going to wake up? How am I going to know what's going on in the news? What if the world comes to an end? I need my phone, I got a call, and it's like, withdraw.
Yes. The White House is like that. You put your phone and electronic devices in a box, and you take a number, and there's a trail, and we got to only go into one side of the lawn, and I didn't give my phone right away, and I tried to take a picture, and this lady came out of nowhere, and she had her, what are you doing with that? I'm like, oh, and the person with me was like, you need to like turn it on. She looks like she could use that and be with extreme force, and I'm like, just for taking a picture, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
It's intense. And then going through the state capitol, there's no problem. You can go everywhere with it. But in DC, it's the same thing. You go through like sheep, and they make you take off all your electronic devices and go through, just to go to the tundra and see a whole other area. There's parts of it you can use your phone, but the areas of where you're looking down where they're speaking, there's no cameras or anything available for that.
Yep.
It was cool though. Danes gave me a blue card, so I got to go see all of that stuff, but he didn't come with me personally. And if your senator comes with you, at the top of the tundra where George Washington's painted. You can go up to, I think Lady Liberty or whatever. I can't remember the lady's name up there that they have the statue. And you can look across DC. It's beautiful. And if you get the opportunity of doing that, or not doing that, going up into the Washington Monument, it's really cool. And how it's so close. I spent 3 days and I flew over it with Ronald Reagan, and seeing how it's so like the wealthy, and then in the White House, it isn't such a nice area of like I envisioned when I got there. I thought that it was going to be just as beautiful, like well taken care of, and it was kind of ran down.
Oh yeah, and
But it didn't stink. That was the whole thing. The West Coast has the worst smell. You get into Bakersfield, you're like, God, what the? There's some that just smell. It didn't
Farms.
have it. Oof.
it was the farms.
Yeah.
You got mostly inner city back in the east, and I remember because I've been to DC a couple of times, and it was the same thing. It was like, oh, this is what they're talking about when it comes to living hard lives and having like just true inner city issues in environments. You know, it's like LA inner city type.
That area of like
Well-
curiosity more than it like scared or
Taboo.
yeah.
When it's more taboo, and that's a big part of it, and especially when it comes to compulsive behaviors, you get into intensity seeking and an escalation of the intensity because of the tabooness of these things, because you get a bigger high, bigger hit every time. The more dangerous, the more you get. Because with addiction, you start numbing everything out, and you have to have more and more and more, and that's the nature of the cycle, and the risk builds. Taboo is a big part of that.
That's a part of what got me clean too. The movie Blow is about my friend George Jung. He got out of prison in 2016 and contacted me. It was Christmas Eve of 2017. I'm friends with his wife Rhonda, and what he put at jeopardy is he wanted that one last run because he thought it would provide what he needed for his kid, instead of his kid being enough to survive off of that.
Yeah.
Thinking that one last run would be a materialistic blow, but that blew everything. And for 20 plus years, she had nothing to do with him. Sunshine, his daughter, actually helped with that movie. She was one of the airplane attendants, and giving the structure of what she went through as a person that had to survive off of, yeah, my dad is recognized as Pablo Escobar's guy and all of this, but to me, he's nothing because he gave up me for this one last go that ruined years of his life and his direction. So I had to get clean because my kids needed to be that direction. They needed to be my coping. And so at the time, they were my source of energy. I needed something to thrive and to put that energy that my addiction absorbed for so long. And so making it something that I was accountable, that gave structure, and develop something that anywhere I go, I'm reminded my kids are the most well-mannered. They're polite. They've got discipline. They're humans at that, but they've got a better hand at life than I did, especially at their age. They know they're loved. And I think that's where we need to remind everyone, like, no matter who we see or the structure, what we're going through, we don't need to necessarily put out, but understand that there's people that deal with the same structure or life.
And I think you should give yourself a little more credit for how far you've come.
It's I feel like being like, I don't want it to go to my head. I want it to stay at a stable, a sane place where I have been overconfident, and it ruined everything that I worked on. And so it's the limits of it that I'm learning how to give myself.
I have a lot in common with you in that sense, and the fact that I am technically and should have been a person who doesn't function well in society. I have autism, and so I've always had that, and it really limited me early on in life without support. And I wasn't able to hold a job. I wasn't able to interact socially. I had no idea the value of connection. I was heavily bullied. There was complex PTSD. And I talk about that all the time in terms of advocacy and stuff, and how support and connection, like we're talking about, helped with that. And so my point being is I also went to that overconfident spot. And so I'm identifying with a lot of the things that you're talking about in the journey, and going from overconfident to not wanting to, or to having that humble piece that you don't want to let it go to your head. So I get it. That's my long way of saying I get it.
I understand that. I appreciate your words. That it's strong knowing, for now, I know that there's a community out there that's more than just us, and but it's given them the same, you can use your words. When I do my radio show, I commonly say disabled and capable, because I am capable of more than what they've limited me at. And I don't know what that limit stops at, other than where they put the fly swatter down at. And that sucks, because as humans, we should be able to explore our full value, our worth. Not so much our value, because our value is limitless. But, and maybe that they have. I've been with the same person. My counselor retired 2 years ago, or maybe a little over a year. And I worked with Mike for several years. He helped me find my authentic self, find out who I can be comfortable with, that I don't need to be impaired, and I don't need to be at a place where I'm pretending I'm somebody I'm not too. Because when I was at legislature, that was something that I tried to dress up like them, wear the fancy suits and stuff, and that is so uncomfortable. I don't like it. I'd rather go over there with just like this, and instead of giving them the satisfaction of me trying to adapt, they need to come back to who put them in office and direct what our needs are.
It's the difference between fitting in and belonging, and I think you really touched on just how powerful it is to let people be human at the end of the day. And I am going to stop here, as we have come to time.
Okay.
And I really appreciate our conversation.
I hope it gave you a lot of good topic and space of use, and people are able to grow and utilize it. And that there's areas in our community that where we're lacking, that there's somebody with the same lack that can help. Because what we went through, people don't need to, because there's tools out there like what the parenting place, how the stories have thrifted through it. That place is totally adapted. Ivy Anderson is an angel. What that lady has done for her it's beautiful. The things that she did for my kids, the things that I didn't recognize, that were now that I see, it's just, and being confident and being okay with that. That's the thing where I think with the dojo, I'll grow in.
It's a powerful thing.
Yes, ma'am. But
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll stop there, but I'm sure we'll continue talking about this stuff. There's so much.
You're sitting on it. But in the 90s, we had, of course, gangster rap. And it really was pushed because of the deal between the music industry and private prisons. they have a deal at keeping their capacity at 90%. And so I really allowed that to overthrow a large percentage of my life. And I see how there's things that are commonly said in rap songs, how women are degraded or the N-word. Like, it diffused that. Like, it gave like that less sense of balance. And now as a parent, I'm like, holy cow, you know, I don't want my kids saying that.
Yeah.
Or treating women inappropriate, or like, I want them to value themselves, but as much as the people around them. And, you know, no matter the relationship with their mom, they came from a woman. So it was with that, like, we got to give the value of, it's sad that she chose the structure and direction, but it's, you know, the power of, she was able to stay clean through where she needed to be and be that person that ultimately gave me the best humans that I could ever say that I was successful at something. It was about being a parent.